Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to share with you the second Diversify Your Fantasy Reading video. I am planning to do quite a lot of these. We'll see whether that works out. So far I have done one where I shared female authors and books written by women, fantasy books written by women. And in this one, I thought we could talk about books that were written by authors with an Asian or Pacific Islander background. And as always, these things are like a little bit like socially constructed, something I might put into that category, you might not, so keep that in mind. But today I want to talk to you about 8 books that I really enjoyed, 8 fantasy books and sci-fi books or speculative books that I would recommend you read, especially if you're one of those people whose fantasy reading is all by white men. So there are a ton of stories out in the world, and some of these are just so fantastic, and I hope you're not missing out here. So the first one I wanted to mention, and this one has made the rounds on like fantasy booktube. These are not like hidden gems by any means. So the first one would be the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu. The first book, The Grace of Kings, is one of my all-time favorite books. It is so fantastic, and I know that a lot of people see it more as a prequel and then the later books as the real story, and I absolutely understand why. For me personally, the first book is like top tier. The rest was interesting too, and I gave them very high ratings. However, I feel like they never got a conclusion that completely satisfied me, so the first book will always be like god tier for me. So in this one, this is I think a silk punk fantasy. So we are looking at a historical period of Chinese history, which makes no sense, you know what I'm talking about. And we have a fantasy setting that is very much inspired by the history of China. And we are following a man, like many characters, but the main character, if you have one, is a man called Kuni, and he lives in an empire, but throughout the first book this empire starts to fall down with the death of the emperor. So the first book is about a lot of characters. We do have a lot going on, and it's about like how this like land that was an empire is dealing with this change. And then the further books go into a different direction. That's why it feels like the first one is kind of a prequel, but I love it best. Then the next one is a short story collection, and the most famous story out of that is Story of Your Life, and that is the short story that inspired the movie Arrival. This collection is absolutely fantastic, probably the best short story collection I've ever read in my whole life, and Chiang is an amazing sci-fi author. I think that all of these stories are so unique, and they have such different stories to tell, and really the only thing that connects them is that they are in some way, shape or form sci-fi stories. And with A Story of Your Life, it is the story of a linguist, I think that's how you say it in English, and she is pulled into an operation when aliens contact humans, and basically she's brought in to figure out their language and make sure that they understand what the aliens want. And it's so good, it's so much more. If you haven't watched Arrival, I would highly recommend. It's one of my favorite movies, and the short story that inspired this is also so great. Then we have one of my favorite series of last year, and that is the Radiant Emperor series. This one, again, similar to Dandelion Dynasty, is inspired by Chinese history, and I really thought it was interesting to read both of these series and see some like similarities and also some differences. This one is much shorter than Dandelion Dynasty, so maybe an easier entry if you haven't read a lot of Chinese-inspired fantasy before. And in this one, we follow a girl who is told that her destiny is to be nothing while her brother is supposed to achieve glory. However, things kind of fall apart when the brother dies, and our main character steps into her brother's footsteps, pretends to be a boy, and mayhem ensues. This is a fantasy series for people who love flawed, terrible characters that are ruthless and willing to do anything to achieve their goals. And that's absolutely what I love. So this series, this duology, which is everything for me, and I would highly recommend. Next up, we have a YA duology. This author also wrote another trilogy that I haven't read yet, but I'm very excited to do so. And what I wanted to talk about here is the books of Ambha series. Now, this duology is one of those where the two books follow two different characters, so they are only loosely related to each other. The first one follows the big sister, and the second one follows the little sister. And I think they're half siblings, so they do have some differences in the way they were brought up and all of that. And I really enjoyed both of these. They do have stronger romantic subplots than I usually read, but with both of these I really enjoyed them, and I think they helped the story kind of be flushed out and feel like fully interesting. And we look at a world where basically there is also some kind of like an empire, but some people are marginalized, as empires usually do. And our main character from the first book, her one parent, I think her mother, was from this marginalized group, and so she's still trying to perform some of the rites of her mother's culture, even though that is forbidden, and that sends her on a journey where she is kind of forced to marry someone, but they do develop feelings for each other throughout the book. And then the second one, we follow the smaller sister, who is more brought up with the propaganda of the empire, and she lives at court and has to follow all of these rules. And I even enjoyed the second book a little bit more than the first one. Next up, I wanted to talk about a series that I personally didn't love, but it is very hyped, so it felt wrong not to mention it here, and that is the Poppy War series. Now, with R.F. Kuang, I don't have a great track record with her fantasy books, but I'm very intrigued to read her new book at some point, even though I don't have high hopes that I will absolutely love it. But in the Poppy War trilogy, which was like her first fantasy trilogy that was published, we follow a woman called Rin. At the beginning of the book, she's still a girl, and she gets into this fancy military school to escape her very impoverished and precarious life. And when she's at the school, a war breaks out, and she is kind of sucked into that. But then she's also bonded to a fire god. And I didn't love this series. I still think it is interesting and definitely very unique. Again, very much inspired by Chinese history, but more recent history, more like World War II history. And I don't really love the way the history was kind of incorporated in the narrative, but I think Rin is a very interesting character to follow. I also really loved her relationship with her kind of rival but not, Najar. Absolutely amazing. So there is some good in this series, even though I didn't love it all the way through, but I think if you enjoy military fantasy more, then you will like this one more than I did. Then I wanted to mention a comic series that I absolutely adore, and that is the Monstress series. And in this one, we are following a woman called Micah Halfwolf, and she is an organic. And in this world, we have organics and humans, and they are at war with each other. The humans also have witches, and the witches need organics to kind of gain power. So they are basically killing off organic children to make them into some magical property. So this is a very, very dark and grim series, even though the art style is absolutely stunning and pretty. I would absolutely recommend this if you want a fantasy series that has women and almost all the important positions in the story. This focuses heavily on like women in power, and also we do have a lot of like sapphic vibes with a lot of these women as well, but some of them are also extremely terrible people. So as I said, very, very dark series. The art is stunning, and we do have a little fox called Kippa, and I would give my heart to protect Kippa. Next up, we have a YA standalone I wanted to mention, and this one is also a book I read quite recently, and that is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea. Now, I got this book on a whim from the library last year. I didn't really know a lot about it, but I had heard some good things, and the cover is absolutely stunning, so I decided to just pick it up. In this one, we follow a girl who is trying to save the betrothed of her brother, who is supposed to be sacrificed to a sea god, by sacrificing herself. So she's trying to go in place of the brother's lover, and she goes to the realm of this sea god, and she tries to figure out what is going on, because the sea god hasn't really heard any of their prayers for a very, very long time. So she's basically trying to save her family and also trying to figure out this mystery. But when she gets to the palace of the sea god, there is 3 mysterious boys, and she doesn't really know who they are. And they tell her that basically the sea god is asleep and they can't wake him. So this is kind of like a magical realm adventure. I wouldn't really say it feels a lot like you're underwater the whole time, even though you kind of are, but you're in this magical realm. But this also had a romantic subplot that I enjoyed. I also enjoy it when the love interest isn't human, but some like magical creature or maybe even a god. So I love that kind of dynamic, the way that the non-human part is like so enthralled by a headstrong girl. Love that. So I had a great time with this one, and if you are open to reading YA, I would definitely recommend it. And the last one is also a YA standalone. Now, this one might be one that I enjoyed more than other people will. I don't know, but I still want to recommend it for the small chance that the right kind of people hear me talk about it, check it out, and absolutely fall in love with it as I did. And that is Girl, Serpent, Thorn. This one follows a Persian kind of fairy tale-esque story where we have a princess who doesn't really leave the palace because she has been cursed, and she's trying to break the curse, and on her way maybe trusts the wrong person, but then there is this like demony person and she might be able to help. So this kind of turns like a love triangle on its head a little bit. It's also sapphic, and I just loved this like Persian feeling to the story. I thought it was very lush, very beautiful, and again had like a very nice romantic subplot that I enjoyed. So take that as you will. I loved the story, but I can't promise that you will because it is very unique. But if you do enjoy like cursed princesses, kind of Persian vibes, and a demon love interest, I would say check this one out for sure. Okay, and that was very quick and snappy 8 recommendations to diversify your fantasy reading. I'm not quite sure whether Asian Readathon will be happening this year. At the point when I'm filming this, there has not been an announcement, but no matter whether it is on or not, I hope you pick up these books and read them this May or anytime this year. Let me know if you're interested in any of these now that I've talked about them. I would love to hear about that in the comments, and have a great day. Bye!